Hey guys, Gilbert here with my second video on this channel. The first video I shared with you my top 5 favorite pieces of Christian literature, apart from scripture, of course. That makes up, Christian literature probably makes up half or 2/3 of what I read. The other half or third is made up of science material. I'm a science educator, or bourbon books. I appreciate the art of making bourbon and different things about it. And then some biographies. There's a little bit of fiction written in there for me to read. So I'm going to go through my top 5 other books apart from biblical teaching. So I kind of picked 5 from different sections. So they're not all related in any way. So I'm going to start with this one. So there's one fiction author I read a lot of, Brad Thor, and I'll post a link to some Brad Thor stuff in there. Probably not in my top 5, but if I read fiction today, it's almost all Brad Thor's books. He had a new book come out recently, and so I'll read Brad Thor a lot of times in my car. Like, reading Brad Thor is like watching a movie, and so it's a lot of books about Navy SEALs and international crimes and things like that. So I'm going to give a quick shout out to Brad Thor on his incredible work. It's the only fiction author that I can regularly read. But the one fiction book, so I didn't pick any of his books in his top 5. They're kind of too new to be classics, if you will, but quite outstanding. So I'll post a link for Brad Thor on here. So the only fiction book in this list, because I don't read a ton of fiction apart from Brad Thor, was one I read in high school. Now, I didn't read a lot in high school or undergrad or grad school the first time. I really started reading a lot in my mid-20s. And the only book I really read and appreciated in high school that my English teachers had me read was this one, is Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. And Frankenstein, the language is just incredible, and just clever writing, beautiful writing. And it's one of just a couple books that I have such an appreciation for the author's approach and the style of writing. So Frankenstein, literally the only book I read cover to cover in high school and in undergrad. Love this book. If you are looking for, and I don't even like sci-fi very much, it's a sci-fi novel. Haven't reread it since then. I don't think it's necessary. I don't watch movies twice or reading fiction twice, but really quite an outstanding text. So that was my fiction pool. The second one is this one, which is Charles Darwin, The Origin of Species. Yeah, Origin of Species is I really struggled in undergrad with, as being a biology major and being a Christian, relatively fundamental Christian, and I battled through evolution and creationism in undergrad. That's a video for a different day. But what I appreciate about this book is that Darwin really takes the science that he sees and just kind of questions things and asks, where could this have come from? How could this have come about? That's good science. And even if evolution may not be something you appreciate or you don't appreciate where that has gone historically in Western culture, the reality is that his approach to it is good science. And it's okay, if this is this and this is that, then how did this come to be? And it's a really good scientific approach. Oddly enough, The Origin of Species takes a lot of heat from Christians as being like the evolution Bible, and that's really not the case. If you read it, Darwin actually argues that there must be a creator who have started all of it. And so the book's really, Darwin did go further in evolution later in his life, but in Origins, he really writes in microevolution, which even the Creation Museum supports. That is that God made many types. And I remember watching Ken Ham and Bill Nye debate, and Bill Nye was kind of taken aback when Ken Ham, the leader of Answers in Genesis, basically said, well, we support the idea that God made many types, and those types evolved into more types. So if there's one finch, it evolves into many finches. And so the majority of creationists agree with that. And that is really what Origin of Species argues for. It's not frogs turned into apes. It's, hey, could all these different finches come from one finch? And Darwin argues that the only way this could happen is if a creator started it that way. And so Origins is, this is probably the hardest book I've ever read. And just to give you a heads up, take Old English, like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, or one of my favorite books, Utmost for His Highest by Oswald Chambers. Take that kind of English and throw in a bunch of 1800 science words kind of deal. That's where you get Origin of Species. So it is a difficult read, but if you're interested in A, science, or B, Genesis, creation, or just science in general, I recommend reading Origins, but you will need to chew on it very slowly. The third book is my favorite biography, and that is Bonhoeffer by Eric Metaxas. And this, my friends, is a big book. And so this is 660 pages, I believe, somewhere in that neighborhood, 600 pages. And so Bonhoeffer, pastor, martyr, prophet, spy. And in my previous video, I'd mentioned that one of my favorite books was Life Together by Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Well, this is biography, and how this theologian, very, very young theologian, was born into early 1900 Germany and became a doctorate of theology at 21, and then was ultimately martyred just before the end of World War II by Hitler. And again, it's kind of crazy when you think about pastor, martyr, prophet, spy, and he was still a young man when he passed away. And a lot of great works by Bonhoeffer. Life Together, as previously mentioned, The Cost of Discipleship, Letters from Prison. There's a lot of good stuff he put down in just a short time he was with us. And so Eric Metaxas does a really great job of writing historical biographies. This is just, again, New York Times bestseller, just an outstanding read. This was the first major audiobook I read. It was when CDs were still the thing to do. It was 18 discs, but I just took it all in very quickly. It was a great read. This one is the most recent book I've read. This is Bourbon Empire by Reed Mittenbuehler, and he is still an active author and active on Twitter. I just shared a Twitter exchange with him recently. This is an outstanding book. It was not what I was looking for, and I fell absolutely in love with it. It is a history of bourbon and whiskey and how it came to be in the United States. And so there is, I thought it was going to be a book just about bourbon specifically the whole time, and it was in a way. But it goes through the American Revolution and how whiskey developed during that time and how it got the name bourbon and why Kentucky became the primary place to make bourbon and things like that. It is a history book. It is an economics book. It is a book about war. It is a book about politics. It is a book about, obviously, bourbon. And so really outstanding read about American history and how we got to where we are with bourbon and whiskey in general in this country. So really great read. I was just absolutely impressed by this text. Again, I was looking for a book more about tasting of bourbon, but this is more of a history book. The author did recommend to me another author named Lou Bryson, who wrote a book called Masterclass of Whiskey. I just finished that book as well, and it's quite good as well. And shout out to the author on recommending another author. That is a humble thing to do, and I appreciated it. And the fifth book, and the one on this list that's had the most impact on my life, is John C. Maxwell's 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. This book I've read and taught. I think I've read it 8 times and taught it 7 times. A lot of times I'll have small groups I teach this to, whether in my school or here at my house in the ministry. 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. A lot of the same principles that you will see in a book in the previous video, The Master Plan of Evangelism. But Maxwell just breaks down like 21 important things that leaders should be doing. He is a pastor. He does not write it from a Christian perspective. There's once or twice in the book where he kind of stops and says, hey, this next page is mostly for people in Christian leadership. But for the most part, it is not a piece of Christian literature. It is written by a pastor, and it's about leadership, and the principles of leadership are kind of biblically driven, but it's not, there's not scripture in the book really at all. It's not written for that, it's not written for Christians only. And I know like the principals in my school read it as a group, as well as the principals in my entire school district. So it's not a theology book of any sort. It is a book written about leadership principles, and so it's outstanding. If you've not read it, I think it's something that everybody should read. It's any kind of leadership position whatsoever, whether you're a manager at the local restaurant, or you are a teacher, or you're a pastor. Anybody in a leadership position should be reading that book. There's a study guide for that one on my website as well. So hopefully that helps. Hopefully those 5 books and even the extra recommendations, the bonus material, hopefully, and I'll list all those on the site. But hopefully some of those help you. Please, this is new for me, but please hit the thumbs up and the subscribe button. Thanks, guys.